I still think about this encounter as an adult. When I was about 10, I'm 25 now, I was downstairs watching TV late at night with my mom and sisters. Everyone decided to head off to bed, and I was left alone downstairs. I started drifting off, and all of a sudden, someone started banging on our door hard. I'm talking let me the fuck in hard. I was so scared, I just sat there frozen, staring at the door, like my life depended on it. My dog was laying right next to me, and he just stared. He never barked or moved an inch, which was odd because he always barks at the door. The banging never stopped for what felt like a solid 5 minutes, but in reality it was probably only a minute. I looked at my dog and I think because I finally moved, my dog snapped out of his trance, looked at me for a split second, and jumped up and ran towards the door. He still didn't bark, but instead started turning his head like he was confused. I finally got the courage to get up and open the blinds, to see what was going on, and this young woman, maybe around 20 or 25, was standing there, holding her left breast in her hand. It was still attached to her, but she had pretty large breasts and she was holding it, trying to keep them up from sagging, I'm guessing. She had blonde hair, white skin, and was covered in blood. Her shirt was ripped and her hair was a mess. I remember thinking she may have gotten beat up or was in a car crash. Either way, I immediately went to go open the door. As soon as I went to unlock it, my mom out of nowhere slammed her hand on the door and relocked it. I had no idea she'd even come down the stairs, let alone walked up behind me. I was so focused on the door and on this woman, when she slammed her hand, it was almost as if it knocked me back into reality. Reality of not opening the door to strangers in the middle of the night. I looked up at her and I could feel my eyes were wide and I think I even started crying. She put her hand on my shoulder and moved me away from the door. She yelled, "Who is it?" through the door, and the girl yelled back that her boyfriend had beat her up and they lived in the apartment across the street from us. Mind you, we lived in townhouses in a cul-de-sac. Our unit was all the way in the back where you would start the turn. We were the first unit on the row, but where she pointed out her and her boyfriend's place was, it was quite a ways from us. You'll see how I know that in a minute. My mum asked her name, and she said something that sounded like something any. Maybe Bethany or Stephanie, or something like that. I saw my mom hesitate to open the door, but after she yelled, "Please help me," my mom opened the door, stepped out, and pulled it closed to shut, but not completely shut. I cracked the door behind her to make sure she was okay, and also see what was going on. The woman, we'll call Bethany, kept thanking my mom and asking to come in because she was scared her boyfriend was going to come after her. My mum refused and explained that she couldn't let her in because of the safety of her 4 kids, but said she could sit out there with her. My mum yelled at me to grab the phone and call the police, so I did. My mum started asking what happened, and the specific unit she lived in. She pointed towards her specific one, and told my mum the building number and her unit, B. This silver SUV pulled up a little later, and she ran towards it yelling, "That's my sister," and then just jumped in. The car sped off, without another word from her or a single word from her sister. My mum looked back at me confused, and came back inside and shut the locked door. We just stood there and looked at each other. I asked my mum what about the police, and she said she would wait for them downstairs if I wanted to go to bed. I was too scared to leave her, so I waited with her. Once they arrived, my mum explained what happened, and the officer said she did the right thing not letting her inside. Weird thing is, my dog never barked once, until the cops knocked onto the door. They also explained that they've been receiving similar calls like that in the area recently. Even worse, the next morning we all packed up to go to the grocery store, and as we passed that building, you could tell the apartment was empty. Like no one had been living in it. Maybe they just didn't have any furniture or anything, but it was still weird. He never came after her that night, and we never saw her or the SUV again. Bethany or Stephanie, I hope you're okay, if this was real, but if it's not, don't ever knock on my door again. A long time ago, when I was 6 years old, I'm in my early 40s now, I was kidnapped while walking with my mother and brothers on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I have only splintered images as memories of this day, but the way my mother and my granny tell the story, it goes like this. I have 2 older brothers. We are all about a year apart. All 4 of us are walking along Bourbon Street, and there's a walk area with a large fountain. I recall playing in this fountain with all the other kids because it was Louisiana in the summertime and it was hot as balls. I'm not gonna lie, I was adorable as a kid. I still am, lol. I'm the only ginger in my family, and when I was young, my hair was fire red. Not stupid orange, but that colour red that women all over the world spend billions on every year, trying to get dyed in their hair. I had freckles, and was always hopping, and I had an adorable stutter. I'll try to include a picture of my cuteness. Anyway, we were walking along. My older brother Jason was in my mom's arms. He stubbed his toe and he was upset. And myself clinging onto one hand, and my brother Josh, who was 2 years older than me, was walking directly in front of her. When, these are my mom's words, a tall Creole voodoo type man with long hair walked up beside me and grabbed me and sprinted away. She started yelling, "That man took my baby! That man took my baby!" and was unsure if she should drop my brothers, leaving them vulnerable and exposed to pursue. Lucky for my ginger ass, there was a police officer on a horse within earshot that came trotting up, and my mom yelled at the cop, "That man took my baby!" and pointed him out just as he rounded a corner out of sight. The cop took off after the suspect, and about 2 blocks later, the cop had caught up with me in the arms of this guy, who dropped me, realising he was screwed, and tried to get away in a car that was waiting for him. A car chase ensued with them and the cops. Now depending on who tells the story, mom or granny, after the chase ended, the suspects fired at police, and the cops ended up killing them. Or they didn't. I'm still unsure. But I was rescued, and brought back to my mom unscathed, albeit freaked the fuck out. There was no telling what would have happened to me had the cop not been there on his horse. I may have been sacrificed, voodoo is a thing, or sold on the sex market, or who knows what. Living with my parents and fresh out of high school, I really didn't have a direction I wanted to go. I would tend to come home late most nights. One particular night, I arrived and went to my room, watched some YouTube, and went to bed. I remember my dream real good. That's a rare thing for me. I forget a lot. I was walking down the hall, through the room, when all of a sudden, I'm in bed with my little sister, saying she can't go to sleep. She's scared. I look around, I'm in my brother's room, and I tell my sister to just lay down and go to sleep. I'm saying this to her as I see the closet doors swing open, and from the end of the bed, something grabs my leg, and drags me off into the floor where I grapple with this thing. As I fall forward, holding onto this man-like creature all of a sudden, I'm in my bed, sitting up with this thing trying to get it off me, as I can now feel its body. Like when you skin an animal and you can feel its muscle and bones. That's the only way I can describe it. It finally lets go and jumps back from me off my bed into the wall of my room. I sat there in bed, confused and freaked out. I was fighting something in my dream, and I brought it with me as I woke up. The next morning, my father was telling my mom that he had a strange dream where he walked from his room to make sure the house was locked. On his way, he noticed something sleeping in the couch, and that just thought to himself, "Oh, it's my wife's sister's husband." They'd never met before, and he lived in Lafayette, Indianapolis. He goes back to sleep in his dream. As my parents are saying all this, my mom's phone rings. Her sister's husband had killed himself the night before, while my aunts and cousins sat in the living room watching television. I never told my parents about my encounter that night. But I think that night I got into it with the demon that was supposed to take my uncle that night as he came to visit my family. I'm a hospice nurse and had this experience about 10 years ago when I was a fairly newly qualified nurse and had been at the hospice about 6 months. I was on nights, and after handover from the late shift, I set off to check in on all the patients, 12 people, with 4 in small private rooms. The private room patients were the closest to death, bedbound and sleeping for long periods. They had no contact with each other. In the first private room, the old lady asked me, "Was that your dog in here earlier, nurse?" I said no and asked about the dog. She told me it was big and black, and like a German shepherd. I told her that it might have been one of the Pets' therapy dogs. I knew one of those was a big black greyhound, but it shouldn't have been roaming off lead, and of course, isn't GSD looking. I checked the visitor log, and no therapy dogs had been in that day. I put it down to a pain medication and illness, until I went to the second private room, and the gentleman said, "There was a big black dog right by my bed earlier." I could see he was distressed, so I said it must have belonged to one of the visitors, and it had gone now. But a shiver went down my spine. The third private room was another lady, very weak, but still quite lucid and coherent. Again, I heard about a black dog. I asked if it looked like a GSD. She said it looked like a wolf. I told her that 2 other patients had seen it, and that seemed to reassure her. I told her that I would be looking into why a visitor's dog had been wandering around, but I knew there had been no flesh and blood dog on the unit that day. We lost all 3 of those patients within 24 hours. The first 2 were expected and slipped away peacefully. The third lady wasn't expected to go quite so soon. She had a catastrophic bleed that night. In British folklore, a black dog is often associated with death, and was once seen as a sort of spirit guide that led people to the afterlife. It could, of course, have simply been a coincidence. Morphine makes people trip. Often they see animals. It's very likely that these people had prior knowledge of black dogs as part of English mythology. But still, all 3 seeing the same apparition on the same evening is pretty creepy and fascinating. It's something I still think about a lot to this day. I was roughly about 18 or 19 years old, so almost 13 years ago now. My friend at the time asked me if I wanted to go ghost hunting with him in this other group, one of the members he was trying to get to know on a closer level. At the time, I had nothing to do, so I agreed. The first place we went to was a cemetery. My friend and I get there, the other people were already there. There was a lesbian couple who were the leads of the group, as well as being super nice. A guy who was excited to do this, a girl who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else but there, and the girl my friend was interested in. We spent a good hour in the cemetery, and nothing really happened. My friend says that he felt like someone was watching us. I don't believe him, because the couple brought ghost hunting gear, and nothing popped. On top of the fact that I think he was just trying to impress the girl. We eventually leave, and go to the next place. The next place was... I don't even know what to call it. It looked like it could have been a church or a meeting hall. The biggest thing about it was that whatever it was burnt down and abandoned. You would think not much remained, but it was such an old building that it was made out of cement bricks, so only the flooring, ceiling, and windows were gone. Though the real frightening thing about the building was the fact that it was so far out from the city that it was a place where people went to use drugs. Along with the gear, we also had some form of self-defense, just in case, before making our way in. Immediately, we had to be careful going in, as there were random syringes laying around. The ground inside was dirt, stone, and the old wood flooring that was stomped into the ground with trash, debris, and needles scattered about. There were no interior walls in this building, but you could look to the ground and see where the walls would have been. The ghost hunting gear the couple had was acting weird. Not that it was picking something up, but that it wasn't turning on at all. All 3 pieces they brought didn't work, so we just relied on an old tape recorder that my friend brought that did work. We set it up in the middle of the building and went about our ways. We spent about 30 minutes there, but it felt longer, mainly because I was worried that a drug addict would show up. But as time went on, the sky would get darker and darker, specifically over the main room of the building. Me, my friend, the girl he liked, and the girl that didn't want to be there were on the edge of the main room, when the girl who didn't want to be there let out a yell. Everyone's attention turned to her as she moved her arm to look at the back of it. On the back of her arm was this large, bright red, 4-finger scratch mark. We decided to call it there and leave after that, along with sense of uneasiness that we were all feeling. As we left the building, The looming darkness overhead was gone and replaced by the night sky. We regrouped in the parking lot of a Carl's Jr. and went over everything. While getting everything together, we all talked about how we had this heavy uneasiness near the end. We checked everyone's hand compared to the scratch. The mark dwarfed everyone's hand. The closest was my friend, who had to sustain himself to get just barely smaller than the scratch size. The ghost hunting gear then was working again, like nothing was wrong. Finally, we go over the audio from the recorder. It was clear at first. We were able to hear us clearly in the background of the recording. Then the sound wind blowing loudly was heard, like you were in the middle of a storm. There was no wind that night, but you could still hear us. Suddenly, you hear the girl who was scratched yelling, and the wind immediately stopped. I don't know what we encountered, but it obviously didn't want us there. It was around Halloween, and we were throwing a haunted house. We were working on it throughout the day, before we were holding the event, which got us late into the night. It wasn't so bad, because we had an event that was going late into the night. We finished up about 85% of it, before we would start to go into overtime, which is a big no-no. Luckily, the event that was going on earlier was done, and it was just closing up everything there. The bartender comes in to close out her register before realising what we were doing. We'll call her Mrs. H, who's this old Korean woman who can be a pain in the arse to work with, but we still love her. Her eyesight isn't the best and she's easily scared, which will come into play later. We give her a tour of the haunted house, which still had moonlight coming in, so it wasn't completely pitch black. The black lights and blocking out the windows would be done the next day. As we're going through, Mrs. H is holding my manager's, we'll call her K, hand in one as I trailed behind them. Suddenly, Mrs. H lets out this loud scream. Now we've startled and scared her before, because we've got to have fun, but this scream of hers was different. The other screams were from surprise, fear, from someone jumping out behind a wall to scare her. This one was a lot more intense. She curls up next to Kay, trying to hide behind her as she looks in my direction. Mrs. K, what's wrong? What happened? Kay and I both asked. Someone grabbed my hand tight, she says, hysterical. I was about 5 feet away from when they were walking through, within arm's reach, but I have to lean in to get to them. Kay and I immediately look at each other, then glanced around. Oh no, it was just him playing a joke on you. He didn't mean anything by it, Kay quickly responded. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mrs. H. I didn't mean to scare you like that, I added. We calmed her down and got her out of the haunted house. As we finish up for the night, you see her holding her hand a bit. Kay and I asked to look at it, and it's red, like someone gripped her hand tightly. Mrs. H said it was probably when she snatched her hand away, but I don't think she believed the lie we told her to calm her down. I should start by saying that while I do believe in ghosts and the paranormal, I believe there are plenty of things that can be explained once you take a step back and think with a clear mind. With that being said, there is no logical explanation that I can think of for this story. This story takes place at my old job, which is a restaurant, bar, event hall on a military base. I was there for 8 years, starting off as a dishwasher and made my way up to an admin. The building was originally built, like in the 80s, but they were built on from it, so the point is hilariously noticeable from the inside if you know what you're looking at. Now, over those 8 years, we've had plenty of employees and customers talk about how weird things happen in the old part of the building, but nothing too crazy, like things moving slightly on their own that made you think that maybe the AC was hitting it, or feeling like someone was right behind you with how steps sounded. I've had similar moments like that during my time there, nothing too crazy. Though before this incident, I thought it was just in my head or something else. I realised very intensely that I was wrong one day. It was stupid early in the morning, going in at like 4, and I was in the building alone. It was the end of the month, so it was inventory time. We also had a delivery coming in around 6, but they have been known to show up earlier. I started inventory the day before, but my manager and I figured that I could come in early, finish it up, put up the image, and I could go home early. That was a deal to me because it was Tuesday, I was off Wednesday, and Thursday and Friday were holidays, so we were closed. I had all the doors open from where we stored our liquor, the old side of the building, all the way to the loading dock, on the other side of the building in the newer half. I did this so should the driver arrive early, he would be able to find his way to me. It takes roughly less than 2 minutes to walk from the loading dock to the liquor room if you walk at a casual pace with all the turns you take to move around. I had my music blaring inside the liquor room, which is a freezer room they used in the old building, which echoed inside the room. As I was counting, I heard a man's voice clearly say, "Hello?" I'd been there roughly an hour, so I thought it was the delivery truck driver who was looking for me. I answered back and walked out, looking for the driver. Except when I searched around, not only was there no delivery truck, I was still the only person there. Now you'd be thinking that it must have been the music I listened to, but I was listening to some game's instrumental soundtrack, so that couldn't be it. Shaking my head, thinking I was hearing things, I just went back to count. What happened next was the first time I experienced this sense of primal fear. The room got real cold, even in the thick jacket I wore, and I was filled with a feeling of unease. Suddenly, the sound of boots stomping down hard on the wooden floor came down the hallway and came towards me. It was at this fast walking pace and with a sense of purpose. I made some sort of noise as I just ducked deeper into the room, pressing against the wall. I raised a leg up and covered up a body with my arms as if that would do something, as these footsteps reached the door of the room and stopped. It was still cold, but once I saw that nothing was there, I bolted out the room into my car, waiting for the next person to show up. Eventually, my manager showed up, and I told her the story. She knew that I was pretty hard to startle, even with employees sneaking up on me. So when she saw the fear I had, she believed me. Plus side is that after that, no one was allowed to be in the building alone during early morning or late night. Cut to my 7th year there, and the newest manager coming in. We go to the old side of the building, talking about a bunch of things with another co-worker. In the middle of the talk, she stops, looks to the side and says, "This building's haunted, isn't it?" No one told her a thing about the ghosts or the weird things that have happened here. Needless to say, I'm glad I'm not in that building anymore. This happened last year, during my student exchange in France. This was probably only 2 weeks before COVID imploded, and I had to head back to my home country. That night, there was a language exchange at a bar, maybe 30 minutes away from on the subway. We were living in the outer parts of Paris. 9th Arendium, for those familiar. My roommate didn't seem interested in going, so I decided to make this my first night out alone, as I had already talked to the organisers of the event, and they seemed nice. Plus the subway in Paris on Fridays closes at around 1:30 a.m, so I knew I had time to go, meet people, and go home relatively safely. I got there maybe half an hour late, got my little flag stickers that indicated the languages I spoke, and headed into the crowd to try to talk to people. Everything was pleasant. I made friends with a group of guys, and we made good small talk for a solid hour. After a while, the group decided to split and try to find others to actually exchange languages with, since we were all speaking English at this point. I headed over the bar to get myself a drink, where a group of what I can only describe as chavs, but French, started annoying me about the flag on my shirt, the Chilean flag. They threw everything out there. Is it in Africa? Oh, is it Colombia? At first I didn't mind correcting them, but it got old pretty quickly after I realised they were just fucking around. I left them to it and started talking to an older man by the bar who seemed nice enough. After talking to him for about 30 minutes, he heads off. That's when the creepy encounter started. A random guy, mid-20s, early 30s, shows up next to me at the bar and starts making conversation by saying, "Oh, I knew immediately where your flag was from. Well done." I just smiled at him, then he started, "Oh, you're very beautiful," talk. Look, as a 21-year-old woman, this isn't my first time in this situation. Usually, if men aren't being overtly creepy, I'll just smile, maybe give conversation a try, and if they keep pushing it, just go. I said thanks and kept nursing my drink. Hopefully, he caught the sign that I wasn't trying to talk. He kept asking me about where I was from, why I was here, where I was staying, to which I gave very vague, short answers. Chile, studying, near Montmartre. Out of nowhere, and I really mean out of absolutely nowhere, he says something along the lines of, "I'm in love with you." Dude, what? I've directed maybe 20 words in total to this man, and I'm getting a full love confession? I let out a laugh that was half nerves, half "are you kidding me?" At this point, he's forcing eye contact. Really intense eye contact. I tried everything. I'm not interested. I'm in a relationship. I even headed towards my last resort, which is saying, I'm a lesbian, which is true. He wouldn't budge. He said, "Oh, I respect that. Yes, it's not your fault that I'm a lesbian." And he kept going with that considered to be the creepiest part. "I want to do romantic things with you." Excuse me, you what? This set me off on that negative gut feeling. One of those phrases that is just off enough that your brain goes, huh? Not dinner, not a date, not something, just romantic things? Well, I wasn't about to find out what that meant. I put on my full bitch face, going, "Look, I know you maybe are just trying to be nice, but I'm not interested and I'm in a committed relationship to a woman." I got up and he tried to touch my arm, to which I immediately flinched and shot daggers at him. "I just think you're beautiful. I want to marry you someday, maybe have kids. You have beautiful eyes." Thankfully, the bar had cleared out some, and I was able to cross the floor and grab my parka. He kept saying things behind me, saying, "I just want to try romantic things." I grabbed a random, non-creepy man I had talked to that night who was just leaving, and said, "Are you walking to the subway?" and went with him. My recently professed suitor followed us. I remember him perfectly, wearing a tan waterproof jacket, standing right outside the bar door looking at me. The guy I was walking with was going in the complete opposite direction of the subway line, but I wasn't about to risk going down to my own line alone and waiting past midnight. Trains take slightly long to arrive. Most train stations have an option to switch directions if you fuck up, without paying again. So I figured I'd go down with my bodyguard of sorts, make him stand with me near the direction change, and if I saw the creep coming back, I'd book it and pray a car came in time. We had an app that showed estimated arrival times. It's just my luck that that specific situation was undergoing repairs, and it was either get your direction right on the first try, or perish. No direction change in sight. So I did what I, in my 2 mojito fight or flight mode, had to do. I ran back up the stairs and tried to pay again, except the card I used was one of those cards that once you scan, you can't use again in at least 5 minutes. I wasn't going to wait that long, and I could hear someone coming down the subway stairs. Paris subway has turnstiles, but it also has doors that only open once you scan. So I sucked in my breath as much as I could, went under the turnstile, and squeezed through the tiny space between the door. I have no idea how I made it past with my parka on. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I just managed to make it downstairs when the train was arriving, but as I turned around I saw him on the sort of bridge area overlooking the train tracks. I managed to growl out my biggest, meanest "no." He said something like, "I want to grow old with you, give me your number." The train doors opened and I walked inside backwards, making eye contact and saying "no" again. Luckily, that's just about one of the most universal words out there. I'm thankful to the Friday night 1 a.m. Paris subway crowd. They all seemed confused, but they had the right spirit. A couple of girls waved me over so I could stand with them until the doors closed, and they went with me until I had to change lines. Let me tell you, I felt safer on the 2-minute walk from the subway to my apartment than near that guy. My neighborhood was kind of known for being a big crack hotspot. At least the crackheads left me alone. So, if anyone takes something away from this, just be fucking mean. Be rude as hell. I tried being mean a little too late and got one of the creepiest love confessions of my life. A stalker into the subway and a story to tell on here. So, this was just a few weeks ago. Me and my friend took up the hobby of exploring abandoned buildings and urban exploring in our free time because we just found it to be fun and interesting. We are from Long Island, New York, where MS-13, the deadliest street gang in America, mainly operates out of some of the towns here. I was browsing around the internet for nearby places to explore for fun, when I came around the Pilgrim State Psychiatric Center in Brentwood, New York. We didn't put much thought into it, and we just went. We parked in a parking lot from a good distance and started to walk through the woods to get there. I'd done this before with other places, and I'd never felt this strange feeling before. Just to walk over, I felt uneasy like never before. There was trash everywhere and dirt mounds that seemed like they could have been dug up. We finally came around the building, which was conveniently easy to enter. When we entered, we were greeted by dirty mattresses that seemed to have been placed there for a reason. We didn't talk to each other about how we felt because we didn't want to seem as wimps. We went through the entire building, seeing many mattresses and old shoes that looked to have been people's. We got up to the top, and of course, it had just gotten dark, and we had a long walk back once we got out. We got back to the bottom of the building and lost our way. The only way out was walking over a plank, over an abyss. But that isn't the bad part. We crawl out through a window and start walking along the road to get back to my car. 2 cops see us while they're driving and come over to talk to us. We really shouldn't be going in here after dark, and they let us go. We laughed it off and got back to the car. My friend calls his cousin to tell him about what we did. He told us that MS-13 operates out of there and that we're lucky to be alive. I look up Pilgrim State Murder, and sure as hell, I see that multiple teens have been murdered there and in the woods where we walked through initially. Cops had dug and searched the woods before to find missing teenagers, so I connected the dots between that and the mounds I saw before. I went to bed that night shaking about the thought that I could have been killed for entering their territory. If you want to, you can look up Pilgrim State MS-13 Brentwood or something. For MS-13, please, let's not meet.